Hello, hello, and welcome to Speaker Sunday. We are going to talk about some really exciting things, but first off, introductions. So, my name is Lilette, and we've got Lazy Warlock with us.
Yep, that's me. I'm the developer and designer, artist, programmer of Lords of Nysera, and we're going to be talking about some pretty cool stuff, as Lilette mentioned. We've been planning and prepping for the initial playtest, but before we could get to any of that, we had to make sure the game was accessible and play-testable, so to speak. So Lilette has taken up the mantle of initial playtester and has had to go through some interesting complications, which we have taken care to fix, so to speak. So we're going to be discussing that. And Lilette, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I play a nice support role for Lords of Nysera. I do the YouTube channel, and we'll probably be kicking up some marketing soon here. But right now, we're pretty much focused on the development of the game. We've got 11 chapters that we're looking forward to deliver to folks. This game was kickstarted back in February of this year, and yeah, so I'm kind of like the guinea pig for playtesting in general, and I delight in it because I love to find like funny bugs. I think there's a little bit of a bug tester in all of us. Some more than others, where it's like if you have this urge or desire or like curiosity on how to break a game, or do something funny, kind of outgame the game. That's kind of like the best mindset to have for playtesting. So that's what I've been up to lately. But I do fulfill like several like mini roles to help the Lazy Warlock. So that's me.
So for those who haven't been keeping up, we are entering what we're calling the pre-playtest phase. So before we hand off the game for supporters to playtest, we are trying to enter the like initial big bug issue sort of playtest that we're going to hand off to a very small select number of people. So there are people we've vetted that we know, and they're going to be working really closely with us to fix big problems more so. So this won't be like a playtest to figure out, whether it's fun to play necessarily. It's going to be, this chapter doesn't work. These events don't happen. This, didn't save properly, so that when we do hand it off to the broader public, which will be over 100 people very likely, they have as few problems as possible, and they can just play the game and give us feedback on how fun the game is, right, and how interesting each chapter is, and so on and so forth. So they can actually give proper feedback, right, not just bugs necessarily. We will of course be always hunting for bugs, but we really want to do this in stages to make it as easy as possible for playtesters. And part of that is that we want to make sure that the game is easy to playtest. So the battles themselves may not be easy to win in some cases, but we want them to be playable in the easiest way possible. We're not about like grinding and slowing down gameplay for the sake of slowing it down. We want the game to be easily accessible and playable with as minimal like fussing as people have to. So that's what we were working on all this month. And on that topic, Lilette, what was your first impression of all the units you got to lovingly place into the battlefield when you first started?
Okay, well, I know like I requested like a couple what's it called, quality of life enhancements, right? Like making the game play a lot easier, more intuitively, and that was kind of one of the bigger things that I noticed. There's these huge battlefields that you'll get to play in Lords of Nysera, and what was the game it's slipping my mind now, but is it like a Genesis, right? That the game is kind of inspired by one of the games.
There's Shining Force, and then Fire Emblem, and I'm not sure what else you're referencing, but
I think it was maybe like Fire Emblem 4.
oh yeah. So Fire Emblem 4 is definitely the big reference, like the big inspiration for the game. And that, so yeah, on that game specifically, the biggest criticism most people had is the maps are huge and it's a slog moving people across them.
Yes,
right?
exactly. And that's pretty much one of the feedbacks I had for Lazy Warlock is oh man, I love feeling like you're on this big battlefield, you've got a ton of units at your disposal. Because one of the things I don't really like about Fire Emblem games is you feel like you're just you're not having an actual battle because there's just not as many, or you're not having battle between armies. Like you might have like a scrimmage, I guess, with 2 squads, and that feeling is easily conveyed with just kind of traditional Fire Emblem style setups. You've got like 5 to 10 units against 5 to 10 units, that sort of thing. But we've got, in Lords of Nysera, a lot of units. Like, you've got your leaders, okay? These people are like your special units that have special abilities, and then you also have army units. And so you can have at least, 50 units on the field, right? Okay.
Right.
And that's like really exciting to see pan out because it actually feels like you're running a battle. It's kind of like the same feeling you get when I play Civilization. I don't know if other people play Civ. Super popular. Hey, bud. But the Civilization games actually give you this feeling that you are moving a country around, like progressing it and everything. And that's pretty much Lords of Nysera is hitting home that feeling of like you are commanding armies, okay? And it's super satisfying kicking the other army's butt, let me tell you that much. So, yeah, one of the enhancements feedbacks I gave was how to move large amounts of units, okay, across the battlefield, across big battlefields.
Yeah, so this was something that I'd been worried about in my development, right? Because I wanted armies, because I always, like Lilette said, I wanted that feeling of you're not just a scrappy group of rebels with 6 people with headbands, right, fighting against the evil empire. I wanted you to feel like, no, you're a lord, and as a lord, you're commanding your forces, right? You have a literal army that you need to take care of, and you need to like command and capture locations and defend locations and lose some characters. Like there's a big flaw, I think, in sort of Lords of like tactical games especially, right, is you have these unique cool characters that you want to add, like that you want to gain experience and improve and give them equipment, but you don't want to lose them, right, because they die permanently. And but that's not really how war works. Like war inherently has casualties and risks, right? And I think that kind of affects gameplay negatively in that you're not really playing like a leader or a commander, right? You're playing more like, how can I min-max this battle so I don't lose my favorite characters? And you kind of end up just cheesing certain things. Whereas I wanted to give, even if people end up doing that anyways, because like they don't like losing their special mages that they've recruited, right? But I still wanted you to feel like you have to make those decisions in battle, and that you feel like, oh, well, if I lose a few of these soldiers, but they hold off this area long enough, then blah, 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 that they have those choices, right? That they aren't just sort of bucketed into, well, I have to do all the, like, I have to fight the same way every single time. Anyways.
Right, yeah.
But in order to accomplish that, right, you have to have more units, and more units means more finicky movement stuff. And that's tedious with a game that's all about like select one character, move that character, select one character, move that character. And I was puzzling over it for a while. How am I going to be able to move a lot of units all at once? And the answer was staring me right in the face, kind of just how Lilette said. Well, RTS games have figured this out a long time ago, and that's select a whole lot of units all at once with a little box. And so I'm just going to jump right to this. So we're going to skip a few of these things. But this is the new group selector. So I got a little video and I'm just going to let play and I'm going to commentate. So it works just like an RTS. If you're familiar, you can open the selection box that drags and you just essentially click, drag, and unclick, and it lets you select multiple units. You can then select a location and it'll ask, do you want to move them all here? And it will just move them all. So you don't have to go back and select another unit and select another unit and select another unit. It'll just essentially run through them just like how more or less the AI in the game would try to move them. So it'll pick the best location that's as close to that spot as possible and just run through them in a list. So there will probably be improvements we make to this over time, of course, because right now it's not that it's inaccurate. Like, it won't have like bugs that it causes where they'll like teleport to the wrong spots. I'll just play it again just so people who missed it didn't see. But it's really nice because essentially it reduces the number of clicks by like in some cases 100-fold, right? Like, you are literally not clicking as many times, saving people their poor wrists.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. And it's like the number of clicks, right? I'm very cognizant of just how much time are you dedicating to fiddling around with something that you don't really want to fiddle around with. Like, is there like a movement or something that you do repetitively that you really don't care about? It's like all it does is it bogs down the game, you know?
Right. And the nice thing is it's kind of as granular as you want to get. So you can just, if you want to select 5 people, you can actually just hold, essentially what you do is you hold shift to use group select. So you hold shift and then you click, and if you drag, it does the box. But you can just individually click a unit as well. So you can say, well, I just want to select all my flyers. So you just click, 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 grab your flyers, and then you can move them wherever you want, right? Because one thing about it is, like, the group select is not perfect, right? Because it's never going to be, because it's trying to like speed things up. But another change we made is that when they move, you notice they don't all deselect. So they don't use their action when they move. That's a new change we made. So when a unit moves now, it uses up their movement. So they have a limited movement they can still use in one turn. But you can keep selecting them and moving them and taking their actions until they run out of action. So it's actually much more like D&D in this case. So if you move a unit, it doesn't just, oops, well, I guess their turn's over. You have to deliberately select wait now if you want to end their turn, which you don't even really need to do, because you can always just end your overall turn to just like move on to the next thing. So this is a huge, cool improvement that I'm really proud of, because I kind of had an idea of how I was going to do it, and I was worried it would maybe have some problems, but I knew how I was going to try to do it, and I just did it, and it worked in like 2 or 3 days maybe, and it was awesome. There's a few extra little things that functionalities too. So if you mouse over when you're group selecting, so I'll jump to this spot right there. Nope, go back. Right there. So you can see like there's this big bulky cursor now, and it has a little indicator above it. So that will switch depending on what you mouse over. So if you mouse over, say, an enemy, it'll ask you, do you want to attack this location? So in that case, instead of just moving, they will all default to essentially basic attacks and swarm that enemy or that group of enemies. So if you say you just have a block of generic units and you want them to face off, and they're all just, fighters and whatnot, right? Then they will all just swarm and attack the location, and they will essentially use the best normalized way of attacking that's already in the game that the enemy uses. So you're essentially trying to just trade blows. And again, it's not as precise maybe as how you would want to attack like specific units, but they'll know to attack like weaker units or units that have disadvantage against them, stuff like that. So they'll always pick the best target based off of essentially the stats in the game.
Gotcha, right. And one of the things too I want to bring up here, so Rosa Zerg, one of our Edensoft brothers, so these guys, by the way, they're making their own game too, so we love to promote them. They are amazing people, and actually
not just making a game, they have their game out. So if you want to play a cool space horror type arcade game, they have a Circus Interstellar. You can check that out and play it right now on Steam. It's a ton of fun, especially if you have an arcade cabinet to play it on.
Yes, it is It is terribly fun, let me tell you that. We actually own a copy of the game, and Tony and I, we've got arcade cabinet, and it's fun. But aside from that, okay, so he's got a question for us. Have you guys thought about adding a shortcut key for selecting unit types on the screen? It kind of reminded me of the conversation, by the way, Tony, with Bod about like being able to have teams or squads.
Yeah, so that's essentially going to be the next functionality that we use with the group select. So now that the group select is working, so what you can do in the game, and most people haven't been able to try this out yet, but you can squad your unique units. So your unique units are considered essentially officers in the game, and you can assign them your army unit. So you can see, like right here, it's probably hard to tell, but like Artemir, this archer, he's got a little symbol over him. That means he has units following him. And if you mouse over him, he'll show all the units that are under his command. So the goal will be essentially, if you want to just click on that leader right there, you can group select all of his followers and just move them all at once. Just like this. So, and then they'll be able to act in a group essentially. As far as doing like specific types of units, that could be an option, but for now I think it'll be easier, since like people will essentially be bucketing, well, I have this flyer officer, right, like Rianne here. She's obviously going to be the best to assign flyer units. So just select her, select like where she wants to move, and then there's going to be an option to group move, more or less, and it'll just instantly auto select her team and move them with her. So that's going to be the next stage of this group selection system, but we wanted to be able to do a bulk version first, right? Because that's like essentially the easiest way to group select, and then you step down to the next granular level is follower selection, right? So, or like team selection, whatever it may be. So that's going to be the most likely version of it. But if people really request, like, I want an option to be able to select all of my flyers all at once, irrespective if they have a leader, then maybe we'll have like essentially like a double click system, right? Where if you shift double click on someone, then it'll just like boop boop, and it'll select all the flyers. So we can play around with that. But that's the nice thing, right? Like those input things are relatively easy to do, and you just have like a little function added to it. It was this initial part that was tricky because we had to make sure it even works, right? So this was kind of our proof of concept that can now be utilized all throughout the game. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, so another quality of life thing that is a little smaller but just as important is the auto placement. So people who are familiar with the Fire Emblem games know that before most battles you get to select where your units go. Well, with so many units in the game, we couldn't just have like a bunch of random little individual spots that you can put your people in. So usually you'll find like there's this big block of area. These little green squares are where you can place units. Originally, before playtesting, we had no auto placement. So Lillette, tell me how much you like that as well.
Quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit. I don't really like waiting too much for much. So sometimes I just want to start a battle. Maybe I'm an overconfident kind of player where it's like, hey, I just want to get into the battle. Auto select the units. Maybe like put the units that I used before or something like that. But either way, like let's get going. Let's play. And then if I lose the battle, then that's when I will kind of adapt and pivot, right? But when I'm done with the talking scenes before a battle, I'm just excited. I just want to dive right in. I'm like, okay, let's see some blood.
Yeah, so one thing I had like kind of forgotten to finish was essentially when right before the battle starts, it auto-populates the preparation zone. So it essentially puts out all the units that you have been using into play. So that way you don't have to go into the menu, select a unit, choose where you want to put it, and do that for every single unit. So now what it does is it takes your favorite units that you've been using, or at least the units that you last used, right? And it automatically puts them onto the map, and then it takes all the units that are following them that are like part of their individual groups, and it also puts them onto the battlefield. Now right now we don't have a formation system yet for the player. There is for the enemies, so we at least know how to use it, but it essentially just dumps them out right now, which is still way better than before, because you can reorganizing them is very easy. You essentially just click, drag, whatever, like repositioning is super easy. It's just that initial stage of like putting them on the field was slow and sluggish. In my original version, which had to do I essentially had to do it on an individual unit basis, like for unique units, and that was just too cumbersome to have to do for every single level. So coming up with an auto version was way more convenient, both on my end and then eventually as like the player end, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, right, the battlefields are large, so sometimes initial positioning isn't as relevant, because you're gonna have to go across the same bridge. Like you can kind of see it at the to the left of the video Lazy Warlock is sharing, but there's like this little bridge and you have to cross it and you're all heading there, so initial position isn't as important. And also, welcome, Peaceful Fungaloid. Really good to see you.
Hello.
And
Thanks for joining.
Sorry. We also have Mr. Blonde, too.
Oh, good. Yeah, so this was just like another minor thing that was kind of necessary, but I had like totally blanked on adding it in, right? And these are the kind of things that having an initial playtester like Lilette is really good for, to just like squash these, not like problems with the games, but these holdups, right? Because like we said, we want players to get right into the fun of it and just enjoy playing the game so they can give their feedback.
And that's really what I'm focused on. I mean, the ultimate objective is the game is fun to play.
Right. So this was pretty much the only other small improvement. The rest has been bug fixing, which is, I'm not going to cover all of them because there was a lot, but more or less it was fixes from the last couple updates that we've done. Like the traps, I had a few actions that were messed up because of how traps can interrupt stuff, right? And so I hadn't fixed trading and looting, which you could loot essentially from like across the map, which obviously don't want to be able to do. So we fixed those. That's working great. There was a few other little bugs with carrying units and whatnot, which is another really nice thing, obviously, that you can use in the game. But it was causing soft lock, so we fixed all of those, hopefully. And that led us to just like a few graphical things. And one thing that noticed was floating heads. So I won't show you the atrocity of that floating head system, but I will show you the improvements we made to the portraits. So the first thing we did was we had to completely revise the format of the portraits in their game version. So players will not really be able to notice it, but if you looked at the file format, it's very different. Essentially, like before, it was just a single sprite, like a single image of that portrait, and I just had to switch between different ones to get different facial expressions. Now there's this big old file that has like different heads and whatnot that can be swapped out and moved, and I had planned out that format, but I hadn't introduced it to the game because I knew it was going to be a big endeavor to like essentially revise every portrait file for one, reformat them, and then make sure they work in game. But that's what we did, because we had floating heads, because essentially we had missing textures. So it would say, oh, switch to this expression, but it didn't have that expression, so it would switch to the latest one, which is sometimes like literally just a floating head, because like that top corner little view of a character that you see, that was its own image, and so it would just use that guy, and so there would be a person talking, and it's just like a little head floating in the screen. So we fixed that completely, and in the same time we updated a bunch of sprites. So I'm just letting it kind of scroll through all these characters that got little revisions and improvements, because if I was going to have to like essentially reformat every face, I wanted to have to do as little work in the future as well, right? So I revised some characters that were just kind of outdated or had little weird positioning problems, and mostly they were minor. There weren't any like big revisions to characters, but you can see for some of them there's added detail or slight recolors. But essentially, like, that's done. So the whole portrait system now is fully operational, which is great because it lets us do, for one, all the expressions we want now. So we can have, instead of, we had only 2 expressions we could do before, which was like, or I guess technically 3. There was blank face, no expression, happy and angry, and that's not a whole lot, right? So now we can do 6 different expressions and then 1 unique one. So we don't have the unique one shown here because not every character has a unique facial expression just yet. But like, for example, Ania here, she has like these little lenses she can put on for when it shows she's like doing work during a conversation, where she's like artificing. So essentially every character has that option now, like a special facial expression, and they all have their expressions now. So I took the time to essentially go through every single character and make sure, oh, they didn't have these expressions, well, time to do them. So I drew them all out, and now every new character will be able to be formatted just as easily, so I don't have to go back and work on them again. So
Right.
they all look nice, and then the most important thing is the code is done, right? So all the code is done for these characters to be fully realized in their portrait versions, including animations. Now, not every unit has the animations because that's a huge endeavor, but I essentially did the code in game to do it. So now it'll know, like, is there an animation? Okay, then do this. And if it doesn't have the animation, then it doesn't bother. But now I can animate the faces, so their eyes can open up and blink and do different like states, so they can show whether they're like pissed off or something. The mouth can move when they're talking, and there's even different enunciations. So there's 3 different enunciations that can happen depending on like the type of vowels used in the game. So when they talk, they actually get a pretty close approximation of like making a proper talking animation. It's kind of neat. It's not just like a Muppet just going like ma 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 ma, right? So that was really cool. And then the last thing, which again I don't get to show here because it's not done, because like not every character has them, but there's small little detail animations. So if they're a Lagani, who are like the demon looking people, and they have their tail, then their tail can wag. If one thing I'm gonna do with Ania is her little sphere buddy here will bob and glow a little bit. So little details like that are really easy to animate. Well, not easy to animate, but easy to add in as an animation. Now 100% possible in the game, and I've even tested it out with like my one of my characters, who is essentially like the how much can I do this character to the max with like animations and expressions and whatnot, so that I know that this is the limit, right? This is the max amount of what I want to do or can do for a character, and then everything else can be a less amount of that. And I use that character to do all the code, more or less. So was really happy with how it looks and how it works and how easy it is to add it in, like code-wise. It doesn't take like a monumental effort to do it. All I have to do is like find out where their head goes, more or less, and that's it. So really happy with how that works. And now like there's cool expressions, so the characters feel a little more alive than just like the blank face that they have for everything. So and also no more glitches, at least ideally no more glitches, because there will be like little oopsies where accidentally I put like a head a little off to the side or something.
Nice. Yeah, so we've got an expression update pretty much,
yeah.
and or expression overhaul, I would call it, because you actually
Right.
You were using the system, and then you had to deprecate that old system and then plant in a new one.
Yeah, I would call it an overhaul for sure. It was essentially, I tossed out the old system and I had to remove parts of like code even, right? Because it was old and not useful, and completely revised it. So completely revamped not only the sprites themselves, but the actual formatting of how they're used. So that was really cool.
Super nice compliment from Peaceful Fungaloid. They say the character design is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll just leave this going for now, just to like show, you know, like some changes were pretty small, but some were like pretty significant. I mean, there's even like I made little world building upgrades too for some characters, because like there's like Yavira and Ronik, who anyone who's played the demo, they know them. They have like a new little scar on their face. Both of them have the same one. It'll pop up over here, and that has cultural significance. And players will, if they, you know, meet any Thronkian and ask about it, they'll learn what that means. So stuff like that. Little improvements in some cases, but some of them were like anatomy improvements where their head was literally too big or their neck was way too long, like in the case of Mercure here. That just like I altered it to still keep the general vibe of the character, but just improve the sprite altogether. So, and these are just like the biggest examples. Almost every character actually got a small improvement. So yeah. Let me just cycle through the rest of these and make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, so this anyone who has this sprite here was also a new character. He's not a character you get to play as, but it's a very significant character, and I just wanted to showcase him because you can also have different portrait states now. So there's the undiseased version of him where he doesn't have these black veins on his face, and he has this diseased version. So I can now swap between those pretty much on the fly or through a conversation, essentially little commands, and they all have their own facial expressions. And so, like I said, all that code work is done, which is a huge relief because now I can just use it, right? I don't have to worry about, I can't like include this expression in this conversation because I don't have it, because now it's just there. And even if I don't have it, there won't be any floating head problems because I've essentially put in some kind of backup system so that even if there's no expression, it just shows like a normal sprite. So yeah. So that's that, the portraits, the auto placement, the group selection, and then the last thing is kind of a surprise. It's mostly unrelated to actually any of this stuff with the improvements, and it's just a fun thing we're going to be doing for the community, which is sword timbre. So anyone who is into artwork and into art challenges knows that there's usually monthly, someone somewhere in the world is saying, hey, here's a challenge you can do. And since I've done art my whole life, I've always thought, oh, that sounds like fun, but I've never been able to finish one. And I was inspired by watching a few pixel artists who were doing swords, and I thought, you know what, I have the time to do this, and I'm going to do a sword timbre. So for the last week, starting on the 1st, I've been drawing a sword every day. And it's usually like before I go to bed, and I just do a quick drawing and a little color to just get an idea what it is. And I actually roll for random swords. So I essentially have my like D&D dice, and I have this list of things I roll for, and then I just have to draw it. So I have to come up with a design based off of usually the material it's made of, the culture that it comes from, the length of the sword, the handedness, which is like one-handed, two-handed, or like half-handing, the length of the sword, and then finally the strangeness of the sword. And all of these are going to be swords made by the swordsmith Kamuli. So anyone who watched the artifact video that we made a while back, a specific sword maker named Kamuli was mentioned in it. And so I'm doing essentially a Kamuli series. So these are going to be 30 or 31, however many days are in September, I don't remember. But it's going to be a September's worth of weird ass blades made by Kamuli. He was an eccentric sword maker, and I thought, what better way to have eccentric, weird looking swords than with a randomized dice roll system. So they have to, essentially my challenge here is I have to do one every day, and it has to have a theme that it looks like a Kamuli blade. And so I have to design, well, what makes it a Kamuli blade? How would he make it? And I haven't written up like the lore stuff behind each of them yet, but I have like in mind what they are, right? And so you can see all these different blades, and you may be wondering, that's going to be a lot of swords. Are you seriously adding 30 swords to the game? No. I both don't want to add 30 swords to the game, and I don't want players to be like flooded with 30 different swords from this guy. But I am going to do not necessarily a contest, but it'll be a voting event. So by the end of September, we're going to do essentially a couple rounds of voting, and this will be both on the Discord, and then there's going to be a special voting session for the Patreon supporters as well. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to vote on a round of these. So there's going to be, okay, everyone, vote for a sword that you want to see in the game. And then if, maybe 10 people vote, then that's round one, right? Those 10 votes go to round two. And then it's like, all right, we're in round two. Now everyone has to vote again on the top 3 of these, right? And then essentially those top 3 swords will be introduced in the game somehow, and then there'll be a 4th one, so it'll either be 2 on the Discord and then 1 on the Patreon, I think, whichever it may be. But yeah, it's going to essentially go through a few rounds of voting, and then those swords will be in the game. The rest will be in the lore, so there will be mentions of those swords, and maybe people will talk about how they're collectors of certain swords, and maybe eventually they'll be added over time and maybe some kind of little DLC, I don't even know, where it'll be an update where it's the Kamuli series, where it's yes, I took all 30 of those swords and I made them into the game, and now you have to go on an Easter egg hunt to find them all.
You are such an artist at heart, seriously, and honestly, world building. I think that's going to be a really special part of Lords of Nysera that people are definitely going to notice, is just how lore rich the game is. And also, just for folks watching, I've linked the sword lore video that Lazy mentioned in the chat.
Yep.
I'll probably put it in the comment section too.
And it might be worthwhile to do just a little short lore video on Kamuli himself, towards the end of this event, right? So people can hear about all these different blades, and maybe I'll try not to put more work on the Let's plate, but it would be fun to, once we actually do have the final voting on these swords, we do a lore video on them specifically. So it'll be okay, these are the 3 swords that made it into the game, and here's the lore behind them. So that maybe that's what we'll do. But yeah, this was the special little event that I mentioned. So people can look forward to that. I might even do every week. So we'll chat afterwards with folks who showed up and whatnot, and maybe what I'll do is I'll actually do a vote every week. So every week people can vote on a sword, right? And then that sword moves on to the next stage. We'll see. But yeah, that's what's going on. And as far as dates, so while we're wrapping up here, I'll just jump back to, unless people want, I'll just leave this up because the swords are pretty. So time and progress and playtesting, right? So folks are asking, when's the playtest going to open up? I see this playtesting stuff going on. When's it gonna happen? So I keep saying soon, but I'm gonna stop saying soon because it's gonna just turn into the inevitable, the never-ending soon. So we're essentially going to, now that we have all these improvements, I'm gonna playtest it, because I'm done essentially making my improvements. I'm going to playtest it, fix things. Let's going to playtest it and catch any more major bugs. And then after that, we're handing it off to the initial playtest, which, like I said, is our close friends and people that we really trust to essentially do the overall bug testing of what we want to see people to play. So hopefully that's in a week. I can't guarantee whether that's a week, but that's going to be my goal this week, is okay, I need to play test it and get that ready to hand off to people so they can just have at it and say, hey, all this is broken, or hey, none of this is broken, but it was really fun, whatever it may be, right? So that's the goal. So hopefully by next week, this time, we will be handing out to people that we know, essentially a playtest version. So
yeah, and we have a few key contributors on our Discord channel, or server, and we'll likely be forming our bug testing group with them too. So they've been amazing, just folks to talk with, and have had great ideas. We really appreciate their ideas, and so yeah, so we'll probably just have friends, family, plus key Discord members that. And Patreon supporters that have been following along with the game progress since, its inception. So.
And if we do reach out to you, keep in mind, don't feel any obligation that you have to drop everything you're doing and playtest this, right? This is, we're essentially trying to reach out to people we know really well or that we trust, and there's no big due date for these people, so it's not we're gonna get there. It's oh, playtest now or you'll never get to playtest again, right? This is purely to those who are willing to help out with this kind of rougher stage of the playtest. And if they are, great. If they're hey, I've got stuff coming up, don't worry about it. So yeah, look forward to that, guys. And yeah, that's about it. Do we have any other questions that cropped up, Lillette?
No questions, but I think it might be nice to cover just the updates you've done to the prologue as well.
Oh yeah, I didn't include that in this. So there was a few small changes we made to the prologue, which we're probably going to release an updated demo pretty soon.
Yep.
Just because of that. Mostly what it does is we revamped the northern part of it. So people who've played it, you know that there's like the main battle essentially going down in the south, where it's kind of like you're led to, but there's this little loop up in the north, and people have kind of looked at that like, what are we supposed to do up here? And it was a little too vague, like what that whole area was supposed to be used for. And personally, it's probably because I never got around to actually fleshing it out when I originally made it. So we decided that we need to redo that whole area. So we essentially cut out parts of the forest and put in a path, and now there's a little village up there. And that village is also in peril, but in a different way. So people who play this new update will get to have all sorts of fun things to do. It will make more sense why that area is there. We're essentially making better use of the whole map, right?
Yes. Yep.
But we're also making use of some new features. So there's characters that are going to be captured now. So they've been kidnapped by the Thracian raiders, and you have to move fast to save them. And there's going to be benefits for if you do. So there's all sorts of cool things we've added in. And it's mostly like small minor changes. We don't want to change the prologue up too much, right? Because it's intended to be like, we don't want to overwhelm players with like
But we just wanted to incentivize.
Yeah, we wanted to incentivize people to be like, okay, this is like right from the get-go you realize, oh, I have to make choices in this game, right? I'm not going to just be handheld on a railroad on how to beat each battle. I have to like decide how I'm going to approach this, right? And so that's kind of the goal of it, is to give a softer version that's not like they don't lose the battle, right? But they are introduced to essentially the core ethos of the game, which is you have to make decisions and you have to be tactical. So
right. Yeah. And like it makes use of the space too if you want to do like a pincher attack, for example. Right. So there wasn't really any need to go all the way around a mountain range.
No, there wasn't.
But now that you've got some cool goodies, and especially for the lore lovers out there, like I always love just exploration in general, checking everything out. It allows you to do that, and you're not like forced to make a choice in that like you can either save the village or the bigger town. It's more like if there's just a reason to thoughtfully think, okay, how should I save both? Because you can have both. You can eat your cake, or you can have your cake and eat it too.
Right, you just gotta be tactical. You gotta be careful about how you do things, and you can get it all. But yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the biggest draws for me for tactical games in general, is I like a little challenge, you know, and it's entirely optional, right? But I like a little challenge. I like to have it all.
Yep, so that's the last little thing. So we'll make sure to post like maybe a little image of what it looks like now. But otherwise, once that update is available as well, we'll let everyone know. So.
Yep. And then also, I just want to comment on Patreon updates. So we had released a while back now a timeline. It was kind of like our best guess timeline of just what we thought we could hit. And I would like to release we would like to release like a new timeline that is updated with our new insights. It's been a learning process with figuring out how fast we can go through different aspects of the game. Like some things are faster and some things are slower, right? And so now we have a better idea of just how long things will take to make a good game. And so eventually we would like to share with you guys kind of what's in our minds. And I think one of the things too I want to make really clear, communicate out to people, is that the timeline that we have in mind is something that we strive for. And it's something that is really good and motivating to have. But we're not like this huge, AAA studio. It's something that is more of a work of art, and then also something that we want to do good on our supporters. And so, and it's just like a smaller studio, you know, so we have to pretty much keep you guys in the loop with sharing what we can, where our mind is at. And that's pretty much what we want to do with the timeline, which is, hey, like, this is kind of like what we're thinking of and what we expect for ourselves. And just take you guys on that journey with us. And yeah, so that will be something that you know, hopefully we get out soon here, and we've got a lot of playtesting to do, so lots of things going on.
Yeah, I think especially because it's our first game, right? Like, we're releasing our first game. It's very ambitious, but we also want to express the people that support us, right, that we are dedicated to making the best possible game we can make, right? We're not trying to just like spit out some shovelware that like we can get on the market, right? So we have a name for ourselves. Like, we want our product to be as good as it can be, and inevitably, since we're learning stuff, we're going to make little mistakes here and there, but we want to make sure that by the time the game is out and in the hands of people, that it's really like a proper representation of what we're aiming for and what we're capable of, right? And this may mean that we need to delay by a little bit, which is kind of par for the course for, you know, newbies like us, where we get very excited about releasing it, and we have a due date, and we're working really hard to get there. But then we also have to recognize, like, well, we are still working through some things, and we are sometimes a little over optimistic about how fast we can get things done. And so the short of it is that we're probably going to be delaying the release later. We don't know exactly when that date's going to be, but we know that when it does release, it's going to be in a state that we're confident about, right? So we don't want any like first day patch kind of stuff, right? Where, oh no, we released it and it's already broken. We want it to, as soon as it's out there, that people can play it, they're happy with it, and it's fun, right? Like, we don't want people to be initially, we don't want to just get it out there because we said we'd get it out there at that time. We want to get it out there at a time that we're happy with what it is, right? Even if it's not complete, like, we're not going to be able to get all 22 chapters out, obviously, but we want the game to be representative of what we're aiming for. So
yeah, and really it's just bringing you guys with the process, and seeing that like we're really excited, honestly, about, like, every time we do a Speaker Sunday, right? It's so much fun to just share what Lazy Warlock has been working on, and the fun, interesting bugs I've been finding. And yeah, I mean, honestly, we've been really I think one of the things we really value is just that communication, and yeah, sharing everything with you guys.
Yep.
All right, Fungaloid, it was great to have you around. Thank you so much for joining.
Yep, and thank you all for those who popped in as well for their regular viewing. We appreciate you all, as always, and we will be back soon enough. I will be posting a few smaller physical updates as well. Like, I say physical, more like in the chats, so people can look through the pictures that are in this and whatnot. As well as we're probably going to do an update on Patreon as well, and probably Kickstarter as well, because we're approaching that playtest phase, right? So those who missed this stuff will probably see that there, and of course you can always check it out, and people will be able to check it out in the YouTube, because we always post this there. So until next time, guys, thank you all, and we'll see you later.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your Sunday.
Bye.